I have to say that as I'm setting this up with my title, and now I have to remember not to talk with my hands, which was pretty hard for me, that I once had to give a tribute to somebody in 2 minutes. And I said, if there's any congregants out there, I don't want them to think I can always speak in only 2 minutes. Don't get used to that idea. And I do also want to say that there's an interesting competition, whether Father Ken knows this or not, about who has the worst guilt, Jews or Catholics. And I think we will give you some credit because there's a rabbi who once took confession, and a woman said, "Rabbi, I'm having an affair," and the rabbi said, "So who's catering it?" You can use that. Now, I'm going to tell a joke. Hopefully you won't laugh. Oh, you laugh, but it's not. It's really meant to be a cute little story. And at the time that I had first heard this many years ago, it mentioned Jews, Catholics, and Protestants, and that was supposed to represent a universal idea. And it's interesting is that we've all over the years have grown to realize that interfaith has a much wider scope. I think that's a tribute to how we've grown as individuals and as an inclusive society. So I'm going to try my best to make this a little bit bigger story. Here's my attempt to do so. Two young children are playing. One asks the other, "What church do you go to?" The other says, "I don't go to church, I'm Jewish, I go to synagogue." First says, "Well, what's Jewish?" And the second says, "Well, there's Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Baha'i, and so on," etc. is the word I need. But they're all just different ways of voting for God. Now, we should also include all the other faiths that one might have missed, but I think you get the idea that we're looking at. Now, with that, I could say I'm finished. It wasn't that the shortest presentation you ever heard, but I don't think I'll be allowed to get away with that. What I do want to say, I'm going to speak a little bit more in the abstract. I'll try, as time allows, to say a few words about some prayer customs that are expressions of this, but I'm really going to focus on the concept of God and how it really affects our faith as Jews and how we relate to that. We all have our own ways of relating to what we consider to be divine, and yet we all have very similar views of what it means to be good, decent, and moral human beings. And when we talk about those, we say, well, what's the real difference? The difference is how we get to that point, not what we're aiming for. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the chief rabbi of Great Britain — by the way, there is no chief rabbi of the United States, just so you know that. But Great Britain does have a chief rabbi. He recently published a book called Present Tense. He challenges a lot of the views about the future of Judaism and what our priorities should be. One theme he focuses on is the idea that Judaism has within it both a particular nature and a universal nature. And that seems to be a conflict, but he describes how the two really do go hand in hand. In some ways, he is echoing the views of Rabbi Hillel, who said 2,000 years ago, "If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? But when I'm only for myself, what am I?" Rabbi Sacks suggests that it's good for Jews to be different, just as it is good for people of other faiths to be different. Now, this is an interesting concept because with all the interfaith dialogues we've had for so many years that stressed what we have in common and how similar we are, we've finally become comfortable with learning about and accepting the fact that we're different, and that would be more exciting. Rabbi Sacks sees the basis for this in his observance that, as it says in the Word, we are all in God's image, and we are all different. We are all created in God's image, according to the words we read in the book of Genesis. Yet, each individual is unique. There is an ancient rabbinic story which is the basis for this observation. The man notes that unlike coins, which are minted from the same mold and are expected to be the same, we come from the same source. We are all in the image of God, the same image, and yet each one of us is different. And that's seen as a virtue. Being created in the image of God plays a major role, certainly in my own personal life, how I interact with others, and what motivates my sense of faith. Starting with Rabbi Sacks' observation, my faith demands that I see all people as part of one family. It requires that I accept and even respect differences among us. And more than anything else, it is imperative that I do all I can to help others. Respecting differences means I can care for others and help them while accepting that they may have a different legitimate religious belief and practice. If I expect them to respect my faith, shouldn't I respect theirs in the same fashion? To be Jewish is, as stated previously, recognizing the particular and the universal mix. We have our own customs, yet they should lead us to reach out to all people. We are forbidden to stand by idly while a neighbor or a fellow human being is suffering. Often misunderstood is the concept of being a chosen people, although I understand here in Wisconsin we're all the frozen people. We were chosen to follow certain customs, live in a certain way, but in fact, all people are chosen to follow their ways, the ways of their faith. It is never seen as a privilege, but rather as a responsibility. It is also a reminder that true peace comes only when we all respect each other and accept those differences. There is much more to the Jewish view of God that influences our practical actions in life. First, we believe God is infinite. We are finite. We should realize our limits while being inspired to reach for maximum potential. Before God, all people should be humble. It's more important to respect the greatness of God than for anyone to see themselves as being God-like themselves. God is both just and compassionate. We do our best to be fair, rewarding good and punishing wrong. Yet if God can be compassionate, shouldn't we at least try our best to do the same? God is the ultimate creator. In God's image, we should strive to be creative in ways that help others. Also, this is a reminder that we live in actions, not in words. Social action, feeding the poor, saving the earth are all seen as divinely inspired, as if we had prophets today who are transmitting the same idea of God's expectations. God is a teacher. Knowledge and learning, even reason and wisdom, are seen as sacred. All divinely inspired, sacred knowledge is sacred. This includes science, which has always been compatible with faith. God, as a teacher, is approachable. In Judaism, we pray directly to God through no intermediary. In fact, when we talk about the clothes that a rabbi might wear, is really often no different, except for certain occasions, than the rest of the congregation. Wearing the skull cap. And of course, I have one example. Sometimes it's been said that we cover our heads because we've never stayed in one place long enough to take our hats off. But that's Fiddler on the Roof kind of humor. But the reality is that, interestingly enough, with our roots in the East, where the custom is to show respect by covering one's head, which is exactly the opposite of what you're used to in church. You come into church with a hat. Take that hat off. That's disrespectful. In the synagogue, put your hat on. To have it off is disrespectful. Sort of ironic, but that's what we have. It's a reminder of one custom that we have, but everybody in the congregation can follow that. Wearing the prayer shawl with the fringes. The fringes are like tying a knot around your finger to remind you of the commandments that we are to follow, and so on, that we have. I do want to mention that I didn't bring it tonight. I should have, but I do have one that I consider really neat because I thought it's great. Even it has God's first initial, a big G on it, and it's green and gold. Anyways, that's enough Packer humor. We pray in both in the individual and in groups. That for certain prayers, it's traditional for 10 adults to be praying together. We call that a minyan, a quorum for prayer. We pray facing east, facing Jerusalem. If you're not west of Jerusalem, you face whatever direction it is to face Jerusalem. But there's a reminder that our origins are in the temple in Jerusalem. So we continue with that. But most important is the view of God as being non-anthropomorphic. In a synagogue, you're not likely to see pictures, not human pictures for the most part, and certainly not in the sanctuary, and not pictures of God. We're created in God's image, and so we don't have those photographs or pictures or depictions in the synagogue. And it's very important that we see God as non-anthropomorphic, because by not putting human traits on God, God is not limited to any race, gender, age, or any other human limitation. God is not limited in potential, and that should inspire us to keep learning and keep growing in wisdom. God is the God of all people and all creatures equally. So human terms are used only because we lack the language to deal with the infinite and immortal nature of God. Yet we should live every moment in awe of that greatness and are reminded that we are but a shadow of the divine. One more balance. The world is like a three-legged stool. All three legs are needed for it to stand. So another rabbi known as Simon the Just used to say that the world is sustained by three things: by Torah, by worship, and by deeds of loving kindness. First comes Torah, which we understand as study and knowledge of what is right and wrong. Next comes worship, to share our values with our own community. But all only have meaning when they lead to positive actions. That is what we believe God desires of us. When asked what the essence of the Torah is, Torah meaning Jewish teachings and values, Rabbi Hillel said, while standing on one foot, by the way, "That which is hateful to you, do not do to others." Those beliefs, along with the command to love your neighbor as yourself, are at the core of what it means to be Jewish and to believe in the God of all life. And even though I have 2 minutes left, I am finished.